we go. All right. Turn that off. Hey, Marilyn, yay. I'm glad you can make it. I am so glad you can make it. My stuff. Okay. Yep. Sweet. So my fear for this, you know how I tend to go down like wormholes and stuff and just I can give too much information. Like I wanted it to be on a level where everybody can really understand it. I didn't want to get too bogged down in the details that like correlate with other things, especially different aspects of more occultish studies. So I think I have a plan, and that's what I'm going to go with. I'm trying to get mine so I can see my stuff on my phone. Yeah, that's what I was mostly worried about. Let's see my confidence. Okay, cool. There we go. Oops. So, like a lot of stuff, whether it's astrology or witchcraft or magic or even just like people who journal, a lot of people use the moon phases. So we know a lot about the moon phases. We hear about them all the time, right? The new moon is when we start new cycles. It's when we start trying to like manifest a new thing. And then the full moon is like a culmination of that energy. So there's like a waxing and a waning that happens. What I want to talk about is the fact that the sun has the same sort of cycle. It's just bigger. We don't see it every month. We see it every year. It's an annual cycle. But it follows the same like the same energetic pattern. The new sun is when it's like the start of a new thing, the start of a new cycle. The full sun is sort of like the culmination of those energies. The main difference between the two is the biggest two sort of sets of energy we have in astrology, and that's the internal and the external, or the masculine and the feminine. So the moon represents the divine internal, right? The divine feminine energy, and the sun is the divine external, or the divine masculine energy. And when we follow the moon cycle, those things that we're contemplating, those cycles that we start, they're usually like an internal thing, right? If there's a new moon coming up, like, what am I going to work on this? They're usually like an internal thing, right? If there's a new moon coming up, like, what am I going to work on this month, this moon cycle? What am I going to sort of like contemplate or just sit with? It's a very still sort of energy, even if you'll eventually use it for something external in your life. With the sun, everything is external because it's the divine masculine energy. So when we talk about the sun cycle, we're talking about the seasons, really. Like when it comes to the big picture and like the planet Earth, it's all about the seasonal changes. I'm in the northern hemisphere, and the signs around the zodiac really correlate when you're talking about like the winter solstice and the summer solstice, the equinox, things like that. They correlate to the northern hemisphere more so than the southern hemisphere. everything on the southern hemisphere is opposite, right? Like Christmas is in the middle of the summer for the southern hemisphere. And what we celebrate is like midsummer, or the summer solstice is the middle of the southern hemisphere. And what we celebrate is like midsummer, or the summer solstice is the middle of the winter. Everything is flipped, but there's a reason for that too. Before I get too far into that, I'm gonna pull up a picture of the pagan wheel of the year. You may or may not be familiar with it. Here, Wikipedia's got a really good picture that I want to use because I don't want it to be too I don't want it to have too many details or religion specific things on it. Okay. There we go. Oh. All right. So this here is what the wheel of the year looks like. The summer solstice here at the top, that's Litha. Then you have like Lunasa. Some people say Lammas instead. That's like a more modern name for it. It came a little bit later. It's like the Anglo-Saxon version. Mabon, Samhain, Yule, Imbolc, Ostara, and Beltane. And a lot of people know that these holidays, these Sabbats, also correlate with holidays that we celebrate all the time, like Ostara, the spring equinox. That's when the sun moves into Aries. And that's when we celebrate Easter. Yuletide caroling, that's Christmas. Even Imbolc, we celebrate Groundhog's Day. Samhain is Halloween. Like all of these days, these holidays also correlate with holidays that we still celebrate. We just changed the name. Kind of like how Lunasa is the older name and Lammas is the newer name. So today is the winter solstice. It's my favorite day of the year because it's the darkest day of the year. And I just think that, there's something that I find so peaceful about the dark. It's like a time for rest, and when you can really just like let your guard down and cozy up, and the things that are associated with darkness, like sleep. When you're taking care of your health, you're sick, you don't feel good, you just kind of lay down in a dark room and go to sleep, that kind of thing. So for me, the dark is a place where we can really like restore ourselves and rest. Like it's a renewal, right? The dark is a renewal type of energy for me. Marilyn says, this is great because I've been working more with the sun and the moon lately, right? Like, I don't know what it is. So I mentioned a second ago that during the spring equinox right here, Easter, if you'll notice this little point, like this is the month of March, that's when the sun moves into Aries. So when the sun is at 0 degrees Aries, that's the spring equinox. That's how we figure out like when these holidays are. So the equinox means that there's equal light and equal darkness. The sun is up for the same amount of time that the sun is set, right? There's like 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of non-daylight during the day. Same over here with the autumn equinox. The summer solstice is when the sun moves into Cancer. So when the sun is at 0 degrees Cancer, that is the summer solstice. That's when there's the most sunlight. It's the longest day of the year. The sun is up for the maximum amount of time. Today, the winter solstice is the darkest day of the year. So that means there's the least amount of sunlight. It's the shortest day of the year. When we have no moon in the sky, that's called a new moon. Yeah, Marilyn makes a very good point. I touched on this a little bit in the last moon stream that I did. Magic works better this time of the year because there's less sun, because that sunlight like dissipates magic and energy and things like that. Oh. So today is a celebration of a new sun cycle. It's the darkest day. It's the new sun. Just like the darkest night when there's no moon is the new moon. The summer solstice, when there's the most amount of sunlight, is the full sun. So the spring equinox would be like our first quarter sun, and the autumn equinox is sort of like the last quarter sun. So just like we have 8 phases in the moon cycle, we have 8 phases in the sun cycle as well. And it lasts the whole year. So we have like the dead of winter, right? That's where we are right now. Everything is very still. It's very quiet. There's no external things happening. When I say external, I mean like when we think about our daily lives, maybe not so much now because we have light. We have man-made lights. So people work the night shift. They go grocery shopping at night. There are 24-hour gas stations and restaurants. And if you live in a very like city type area, you know, people are going nonstop. Nobody really has a specific time. Like it's not as much of a distinction between day and night anymore. People don't go to bed when it gets dark. They don't wake up when the sun comes up. They just live their life however. But especially back in the day, like the darkness was when people rested. They stayed in the house. They didn't go outside. They didn't do work outside. So when we're talking about agriculture, the winter solstice, the middle of winter, you're not working the fields, you're not growing anything. You've already gotten everything in for the winter, that kind of thing. You don't start growing those things again until springtime, summertime, and then in the fall you harvest them. So that's the sun cycle, the sun being the divine masculine external energy. We're talking about growing things out. Remember, the internal energy is everything that happens within. And it has to start within. Everything starts within before it moves out. Whether it's people, like people are formed in the womb, they grow, and then they go out into the world. Seeds, like plants, animals, even ideas, they all start internally before they go forth into the world. So this is also like a time of incubation. Animals are hibernating. The seeds are like buried deep in the ground, getting ready for their time to burst out. Imbolc is, well, before I say that, like, so starting like tomorrow, it's going to be a little bit brighter. The days are going to get a little bit longer. It's still going to be way more dark than light, but this is the last day of like, it's getting darker and darker. Every day the sun's setting earlier and rising later. It's the new sun. So that's what is celebrated at Yule time, the winter solstice, Christmas. You're celebrating the return of the light, the return of the sun, the return of the divine masculine, really. in bulk, we start seeing like, okay, now the days are getting even longer. We can start kind of like planting our crops and things we're going to grow. Ostera, the spring equinox, that's when like animals are born. That's another thing. Like a lot of animals are pregnant during like January, February, this part of winter, and then they give birth in the springtime. And then the baby animals grow as we go through April, May, Beltane. The crops are growing. By the time we get to midsummer, the summer solstice, when the sun is at its fullest, that's the peak of the crops that have grown. Like all the baby animals are like ready to be adults. It's when the most work was going on back in the day when we had to like grow our own food and hunt our own food, and that those kind of things. The most work, the fullest, like the culmination of the energy was happening around the summer solstice because you had the most daylight to go out and do these external actions, these things that were outside of yourself. Then as the sun like progresses through Lunasa, you've got July and August. We're starting to get ready to harvest things, right? I love it. Thank you. By the time the autumn equinox gets here, when there's equal light and equal day, it's like, okay, now it's time to start bringing in what we've grown. It's time to start harvesting our crops. We're going to start storing them. Remember, the energy is equal here. You've got equal day, equal night. They're the same length. So it represents like a transition period from we were working with mostly masculine energy, external energy. Now we've got to start getting ready for that internal incubation, feminine period where we're bringing things within again. So you harvest the crops. Samhain, Halloween, that's sort of like the last harvest. That means like everything is in, we're getting it stored. It's like that last little phase level, like the last crescent of the moon that you see, that last little sliver before it turns into a new moon. It's like we should be done with the work now, and we're getting ready to go into the new cycle, the sleep period. We're getting ready to rest now. This is another reason why between like Halloween and Christmas, when it's very dark, people are like, oh, you know, it's the veil is thinner and we're closer to the dead and that sort of thing. It's because of that dark internal energy. Because like when someone passes away, we can't communicate with them. We can't do these like physical things with them anymore. If we want to talk to them or think about them or, you know, honor them or anything, it has to be on like an internal level. So that's why people associate it with death and things like that. And because, like Marilyn mentioned earlier, magic, like energy, any sort of stuff you do like that, rituals, or if you're going to like consecrate something or do candle magic or whatever it is you do, it's easier to do during this time. And people have always thought that thing is kind of spooky. So, you know, Halloween, scary, death, that kind of thing. I think that for me personally, the winter solstice is like the most magical time, the most magical day of the year, because you do have so much to work with. Because there's the least amount of sunlight. So everything is like internal, and that's where our magic comes from inside of us. For those of you that do magic, whether it's like witchcraft or ceremonial magic or whatever it is, it comes from within you. Like, you are that power. You don't have to have like candles or wands or crystals or anything like that. They're not the thing with the power. You are channeling your power through them. It's a tool. It's like you can put a screw in a piece of wood yourself, but it's a lot easier if you have a screwdriver. you're still putting the screw in the wood. You're just using the screwdriver to do it. The screwdriver doesn't do it for you. It's just your tool to do it. Another thing about this is some cool things throughout history that we've sort of seen. Let me just pull this up really quick so you guys can see it. There's a lot of associations with Christmas and we celebrate Christmas as the birth of Jesus, right? Jesus being the King, the Son of God, S-O-N or S-U-N. But there are also lots of other sun gods and even goddesses that are associated with the winter solstice that celebrate the solstice as their birthday. So Mithras, who's the sun god in Rome, born around the winter, resurrected at the spring equinox, which is Easter, which is also when we celebrate Jesus' resurrection. Inti, or Inti, I'm not for sure how to say that, is an Incan god of the sun. Horus, I'm not for sure how to say that, is an Incan god of the sun. Horus, who's also associated with Jesus a lot. He was believed to have been born on the solstice. Apollo, Calliope, Sol. These are some Mesopotamian gods and goddesses. Argentina, Inuit, Arena. There's some more Mesopotamian ones too. I didn't want to get a full list going. I started to make a list, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to start associating different gods with other gods, and I'm going to go too far down the rabbit hole. So I had to pull myself back from that. Many cultures celebrate the winter solstice with rituals and customs. These are just some different festivals and practices that are done. Just cool stuff. It's like no matter where in the world you are, no matter what culture or no matter where you come from, no matter what you come from, the sun's cycle is something that is noticed by everybody. And it's pretty cool that because a lot of cultures worship the sun. Like for the Egyptians, Ra was it. Like their king, their pharaoh was a personification of, it was like that. It was like Ra embodied as human, right? God in the flesh, just like Jesus was God in the flesh. So during the solstice, when we're celebrating the return of the sun or the birth of the sun, the birth of a new sun cycle, that's why there are so many religious correlations between the son of God or the son of the sun god, because Horus was Ra's son, I think, being born at that time of the year. Yule was a celebration of the return of the light, the return of the sun. It's really cool to me. I love it. So, you will hear people say, well, we don't know exactly when Jesus was born, but we celebrate his birthday on Christmas. And then you have other people who are like, no, Jesus was born on Christmas because we wouldn't have Christmas if we didn't have that, right? But it all goes back to astrology. It all goes back to the sun's cycle, and this being the start of the new sun cycle, the birth of this, right? Which is just once you learn the patterns in astrology, you'll see everything kind of falls under the thing. Marilyn says all the solar gods have similar stories, I think. Yeah, they do. They really do. Like, I know Horus was, he was killed. He was like dismembered or something. And then he was reborn. There's something like 37 stories of like crucifixion type stories where the Son of God or God in the flesh type deities were killed and then reborn 3 days later. Like it takes 3 days to bring them back to life. What was that? That was a really, really cool that was a let me see if I can find it. Those, what is that called? After School. I think this is the one that talked about, yeah, the mysterious origin of Halloween, right here. It's like 24 minutes long. Randall Carlson talks about the cosmic stuff when it comes to like all of these different things. Constellations that represent like the cross and how all of these different things. Constellations that represent like the cross and how they go beneath the horizon so we can't see them, and then like 3 days later you can see them again. It's a resurrection of this thing, and if you're into it, I would definitely watch this video. Let me see if I can post a link to this video. I think I can do that. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So that link right there will take you to that video. Ooh, that is wild. And in that, he just talks about the astrology really behind all of this stuff. He goes into a lot of detail about it. And he's written books and, you know, done interviews and talked to a lot of people. So he says it much better than I do. I'm still working on getting my practice in for that sort of thing. Does anybody have any questions right now? I want to talk a little bit more about it, maybe a couple more things. Next. Some of the stuff I wrote down might be too, it might be better for like another live stream or blog or something like that. So the other thing I wanted to kind of touch on was how I mentioned that the seasons are opposite in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. I think that that fits so perfectly into what sort of the ultimate goal is for astrology. When you're using it as like this alchemical self-development sort of thing. And any form of self-development that you follow, right? Whether it's whether you're doing like martial arts or you're doing Zen work or you're doing even just like regular psychotherapy, stoicism, like any path of self-development that you follow, it all follows like the same steps. You do, like, you realize these things, and then you do this sort of thing, and then you realize some more stuff, and it's like building the steps build on each other. So even though the thing that you do specifically might be different, it still can fit into this like category if you wanted to do a step-by-step process of our self-development. And when we talk about like the divine feminine internal is the moon and the divine external masculine is the sun, that's part of us, right? We each have our sun, we each have our moon. The biggest thing this represents is your waking conscious, which is external, right? It's what you do in the world, what you're aware of yourself doing. That is, that's the sun. That's your sun, is your waking conscious. And your subconscious is the moon. The moon reflects the sun's light. So our subconscious reflects our waking conscious. When we're subconscious, when we're sleeping, we're dreaming, our dreams are about like all these crazy things that we might not even realize we picked up on in the external world around us and the things that we do in this action. But our subconscious brings them out. Trauma creates subconscious things that have to be worked out. Even something like really great that happens to you, like no matter what it is that you go through, what experience you have, it's going to affect you subconsciously as well. It's sort of like structures or builds your subconscious. Your subconscious is sort of formed from your waking conscious. Sort of like in the Bible, this might be super, what's the word I'm looking for? Some people may not like this correlation that I'm about to make, but that's totally okay. If it's not for you, it's not for you. Just move on to the next thing, I guess. But Adam being the sun, the waking consciousness, and Eve being the moon, the subconsciousness, right? Because Eve was made from Adam. Adam does all these things, and Eve is like the one sort of like guiding them. You know how you have like in a relationship, you have the one person that is more of the get things done type person, and then you've got that person's partner who is like a supporting role type. They probably run things more than the one that thinks they're doing the most, really, because it's like it's just a more internal way of getting things done. It's like, I'm going to help you do this using a totally different energy, like the total opposite energy. I hope that makes sense. My point is that we have these two halves, right? We have the sun and then we have the moon. We have Adam and we have Eve. We have external energy and we have internal energy. We have our waking conscious and our subconscious. And the whole goal for like the self-development thing, even if it's just plain like you're going to talk to a therapist once a month or whatever, the whole goal is sort of to combine those two, right? If you're working through traumas, the whole goal is to become aware of what's in your subconscious. And by definition, once you're aware of it, it's in your awareness. It's not subconscious anymore. So you merge those two. You merge your waking conscious with your subconscious. Just like Adam and Eve were married. They were merged together. The sun and the moon are two halves of the same light, right? With the sun, we see the light directly. With the moon, we see the same light indirectly because it's a reflection. The thing about a reflection is it's the same energy but backwards. Like it's the same image, but it's backwards. If you look at a reflection of yourself, you're still looking at you. It's just flipped around. In astrology, when you have an opposition, like during a full moon, when the moon is directly across the zodiac wheel from the sun, it's opposition. one energy is reflecting another energy. But the thing in the middle is you, right? I've said that before. It brings it to the light, like Marilyn just says. So sort of the goal is to get those two things that you think are totally unrelated, they're opposites, you think they don't have anything to do with each other, they're actually connected. Just like somebody who's very like passive aggressive, and then you have somebody who's just such a fucking hothead and they need to calm down, they're trying to fight everybody. That's on the same scale, right? It's the same spectrum, they're just on opposite ends of it. So with the internal and external, same scale, they're just on opposite ends of it. You have to realize that these two things are on the same scale, and that scale is you, who are the thing in the middle that connects them. When you work with them and get them to work together, it creates a balance. And that's sort of the goal with self-development. The thing with the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, it's the same thing. Sorry, my throat is dry. Whatever is going on in the northern hemisphere, the opposite is going on in the southern hemisphere. And in astrology, we're at the center of the zodiac wheel, right? And all of these things are around us, all the constellations and everything. The earth is at the center. It's a geocentric model. So what that means is the earth itself has the same two halves. One half with this energy, and the bottom half with a total opposite energy, which is on the same scale, it's the same spectrum, which is on the same scale, it's the same spectrum, it just seems like it's opposite. I think once you work with different things enough, you find out that opposites are really like the exact same thing. And I know that sounds like it doesn't make sense. But if you think about like a coin, you've got heads and tails on the coin, two sides, but it's the same coin. Even if they're facing different ways, even if they look totally different, it's the same thing. It's the same coin. And that's what a lot of these energies are. Like when I talk about the elements, you know, we've got water, which is our emotions, and you can be on one side of that, you've got just like this joyous love, and on the other side, you've got heartbreak. But it's all the emotional scale, right? With your temperament, that's passion. So you can either create life with that passion, or you can destroy life with anger, passion. Alan says, wow, I never put that together. I was thinking, like, I've thought about it a while back, and I was like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. It was when I was doing, because I'm working on this thing, progressing through each element in the zodiac, like fire, water, air, and earth. And yeah, it makes it whole. So as I was going through each element and the signs, I was like, but what about the southern hemisphere? Because everything is different. Everything is like the total opposite. And I was like, it's the opposite. That means it's the other half. That means like this is how it merges together and fits, right? So whatever's going on in the northern hemisphere is mirrored in the southern hemisphere. It's the same image, just flipped around backwards. I thought that was pretty cool when I realized it. This is another example of how everything astrology is, everything it represents. As above, so below, as within, so without. We have to like merge our two halves, our waking conscious and our subconscious, to be a whole person. Like, we have to acknowledge our subconscious, and we have to build a relationship between our waking conscious and our subconscious in order to be like the best, most developed person we can, in order to be the most whole person we can. The earth, if it didn't have the southern hemisphere doing things backwards from the northern hemisphere, like it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be whole, just because the energies are going the opposite ways. I don't know if you flush a toilet in Australia if it goes backwards from in the US. That's something I heard when I was little. But yeah. I wanted to talk about this too during the equinox, because I thought that would be sort of the best time to do it, but maybe not. Maybe it was better to talk about it during the new sun, to start like a new cycle with the sun. So I guess like the biggest takeaway is our sun is starting a new cycle right now. What are we going to do for the year? You know, like what crops are going to grow, what animals are going to be born, what barns are we going to build? We don't really do that anymore. Most people don't. What do you guys think about that? When I really started understanding the balance of opposites, like so many things started making sense. And then it helped me break things down more and see. I guess my biggest thing is using astrology to understand self-development. And it's not just, you know, you learn what the planets are so you can understand that part of yourself better. Like, that's where it starts. But then there are so many other things that go along with it. I can't wait to get it all out. However it's going to come out. My blog posts on Patreon helped me get some of that stuff out, but I think it's going to eventually end up as a book. Do you know who Ryan Holiday is? I YouTube searched how to write a book, a nonfiction book, and a couple of his videos came up, and then I saw that he was on Rogan because he's into like stoicism and stuff, and he knows so much about like Marcus Aurelius, and he's written all these books on it, and he even does like a journal called the Daily Stoic Journal, and it's super cool. And I think I found that on purpose, you know, like that was what I needed to find to help me sort of get what I need to get out. Because it's not like I just sat down and said, oh, I want to be a writer, I want to write a book. I think that's probably just the easiest way for it to come. So I guess one of the things we can do to honor ourselves and the greater cycle of the sun that is outside of us, so without, is to sort of think about like, what are some of the things, thank you, Marilyn, she says that's fantastic to hear. Like, what are some of the things that we can do, that action we can take, the things that we can do in our environment around us, outside of ourselves, as the sun starts the new cycle. So for me, this is sort of like New Year's. Damien wrote his books by texting himself. I did not know that. That's really cool. Me and Damien are about on the same level when it comes to technology. So I'm not good. Like, I've seen people do like different note-taking apps, or just create a bunch of different Word documents in their phone, or like they just have like a camera set up in their car or wherever around them all the time, and they just like talk to themselves and record it, kind of thing. I don't know that I would know how to find all that stuff. Like, where do you store it? How do you get to it? But texting yourself, that's cool. Ryan Holiday does note cards. He's got like index cards, and he'll write when he has an idea or something, or, you know, thinks about something, he'll write it on the note card, and he's got a filing system for them. and he puts them in like a photo storage box, and they eventually become chapters in his books, and he'll just like go through them and say, oh yeah, I'm going to talk about that, I'm going to talk about this, and he's just like pulls from them, and he's got his book. So I'm going to try something like that. The start of my sun cycle, that's what I'm going to do. So write however you enjoy it. Yeah, like, and I really love writing. I do. I just have no idea how to structure it. The process of taking something that's within and birthing it into the world is never easy, right? Whether it's a seed that's got to grow into a tree, or a human being that's got to make it out of your body, or an idea that somehow has to get out into the world. That's going to be my sun cycle thing. So if you want to do a sun cycle thing, if you want to be intentional about this, do a little magic, or just, whatever you want to call it, think about something that you would like to bring outside of yourself over the next year, and do that. Start working on it. It's a new sun. So that means it's time to start that cycle of whatever it is you want to do, and use the energy of the sun as it goes around. So I'm thinking that right now is when I'm starting. By the time the summer solstice comes around, that should be like the culmination of the energy. So what can I get done by summer solstice so the energy can be at its fullest? And I don't think it's so much about like planning it that way, because they say like man plans and God laughs. We don't want the sun laughing at us, the sun being God. Haha, pagan joke. Anyways, I think if you just focus on the work you have to do, like really be present with it. What am I doing for this work today? What am I doing today? What am I doing right now? Not what am I going to do tomorrow, but like, what am I doing right now? If you're always asking yourself, what am I doing right now? What work am I doing right now? And just focus on that work that's in front of you, it's just naturally going to come to a culmination, and then, you'll have a new cycle. It works that way. We just saw that with like the sun cycle, the moon cycle, like everything follows that same cycle. So is what I'm working on going to come to culmination during the summer solstice or on the summer solstice? It might not. It might not, but it might. But it's still going to have a culminating point where the energy is at its biggest and brightest, and then it's going to wane down a little bit, and then I can start something new. And that's how things work. Marilyn says the universe steers our boat. We just need to row. I love that. That's a really good saying. Yeah. You just need to do the work. And that's in a lot of different spiritual practices too. Like, I know, like, when I was younger and I went to Southern Baptist Church, my preacher would say, faith without works is no good. Faith without action is no good. Like, you should have faith, but you also have to take action based on your faith. And that didn't mean like go out and attack people that didn't have the same faith, but it meant like, if this is what you believe in, what are you doing about it? How are you growing that thing? Like, what motion have you set forth with it? How are you taking it outside of yourself? So I think that's really cool. I don't really have anything else. That's all I'm going to talk about tonight. I just want to, if you've never heard of the sun cycles, if you didn't really, I want to introduce you to a new concept if you weren't aware of it. And if you were aware of it, maybe hopefully tell you something new about it, give you something else to think about, that kind of thing. Yeah. So thank you for joining. Marilyn, thank you for the conversation. It's always so helpful to me. I really enjoy engaging with people while I'm doing this. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And anybody else that's watching and not talking, action is magic. It really is. If you're watching the replay, thank you for doing that. I'm gonna go. Lethan's got a one of his games that he plays online is having this big update in a few minutes, and I want to make sure you can get on here for that. So, if you want to talk more, reach out to me. You can message me on Patreon if you've got my phone number or something. You know, if we talk on a different app, message me there. Instagram. I love to talk about this stuff, so I would love to continue the conversation with you later. Marilyn says this was great. Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you. So I will see you guys next time.